Join Louisiana Right to Life in protecting the vulnerable as we share pro-life stories, insights, and news from the Pelican State. Welcome to the Pro-Life Pod.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro-Life Pod. My name is Ben Clapper, Director of Louisiana Right to Life. We're so glad to have you with us here today, and we have a special episode today talking with one of the leaders of the pro-life movement in Louisiana who has been a part of so many of the successes, challenges, even failures sometimes of the battle for life in Louisiana. And we are excited today to talk about the history, some of the great memories and great challenges over the past 50 years of the pro-life movement. Here with me today is none other than Sharon Rodi, who is, let's see if I can get all your positions and titles and everything correct, but Sharon Rodi is on the board of Louisiana Right to Life. You've been on the board of Louisiana Right to Life since the 70s?
Yes.
Since the 1970s, you're the national delegate to National Right to Life. So Louisiana sends a member to sit on the board of National Right to Life. Do you remember when you started that?
I was the alternate delegate for a long time before I became the delegate, and I guess that was sometime in the maybe the 90s that I was the alternate, and I don't know, 2000, early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We don't know. We're not going to get all the dates right today. That's for sure. You know, too many dates. And then you're on the board of Catholic Charities, pro-life services, pregnancy center known to many of us as Access. And that one you've been a leader on since the 70s, which we'll talk about as well.
Yes.
So you have been a tremendous leader for since the 70s in the pro-life cause. And so just so happy to have you here with us to share your guidance, your leadership for Louisiana Right to Life, for the whole pro-life movement in this state has been a blessing. So we're glad to talk about everything. So welcome, Sharon.
Well, thank you, Ben. And let me say how very happy I am to be here with you, because without you, we wouldn't be carrying on as well as we are with Louisiana Right to Life, because turning over the leadership from us old folks to you young folks has been a wonderful blessing to all of us here in Louisiana and throughout the pro-life world. So thank you and congratulations to all that you and your staff do. We're happy to be behind you and cheering you on 100%.
Well, thank you very much, though I'm not as young as when we met. So that's for sure now.
Nor am I.
That's right. But before, I think the hope today is, we want to, there's so much that's happened and there's so much that's brought you into this. And we want to try to cover some of those things. Now, we could probably sit here and talk for 5 hours about all the things. So we can't cover everything. Maybe we're going to have to do this again. But before we get into all those great stories and the history, one of the neat things I think about you is that you've been a volunteer for Right to Life activities and pro-life activities for all these years, but your own personal career has been really exceptional, has been multifaceted, and has also touched in many different ways on the dignity of the human person as well. So maybe before we begin, just tell us a little bit about yourself and also your career throughout the years.
Well, I was born and raised in New Orleans, from an Irish Catholic family. I married my high school sweetheart, and through all of whatever I've done, he has been there encouraging me throughout it, as has my family. We have 2 daughters, Shannon and Aaron, and 6 grandchildren, 2 wonderful sons-in-law. And we've been very blessed. I guess I would have never written the script of what my life has been. We married right out of college, and I took a job as a secretary because that was in 1964. And there weren't a whole lot of opportunities for a woman in those days when you finished college, except to teach or go to be a secretary, or if you were a nurse or something. And none of those things really appealed to me, but there wasn't much choice, as I said. But anyway, shortly after that, the chaplain from my college, Dominican College, called and asked me if I would be interested in helping with a school that was being started to teach Black and disadvantaged women secretarial skills so they could enter into the business world. And it was a time when integration was just beginning in New Orleans, and the business community had not opened up to the Black community, or Black women anyway, in secretarial positions. So I joined that staff, and for the next 8 years, I taught in that program with a group of young women and a wonderful educator, Alice Chauffre, at the Adult Education Center. And we trained women to enter the business world, and they did a wonderful job. They were able to get good jobs with oil companies, with telephone company, with the Time Speaker Union, just everywhere in the government. And not only were they able to benefit their lives, but the lives of their children and their grandchildren. I could go on and on about how wonderful that was. And so that was through a federal Manpower and Development Training Act grant. That lasted for a few years, and then we had private funding, and then the school was not able to continue. So after that, I played tennis for a little while. And then that didn't last too long until one day in 1973 at Mass, there was a letter from Archbishop Hannon that they read at every Mass, asking women to come to a meeting at St. Anthony of Padua Church to see about helping women who were faced with an unplanned pregnancy, and to help them make a choice other than abortion. I'm not sure that I had even heard the word abortion before that. Remember, this is back in the 70s, and New Orleans was a Catholic community. We were, very protected in those days. But anyway, I had 2 daughters, 4 and 6 at the time, and I thought how terrible for any woman to be in a situation that she would think she had to take the life of her child in order to survive. And so I went to this meeting, and there I came across a friend who had been a friend from grammar school and through high school, Judy Leggett, and she was already involved with counseling at this program, this pregnancy counseling program called New Life. And she said, "Oh, come, let's do this together." So I went to the first meeting. Well, before I knew it, it had already been set up, and the Archbishop Hannon had set up this program, New Life, a couple of years before, with an older group of women, like my mother's age, for instance. And at the time, I was 33. And so I went to the meeting, as did some other people our age. And before we knew it, most of those women had given up the leadership roles, and we were in leadership there, and I was president. So then I was kind of like, well, okay, I didn't sign up for this, but I guess I'll do this.
So you got thrown real quick.
So then I was into New Life, and at one point we had 80 volunteers. We had no paid staff. Worked through the archdiocese, kind of in conjunction with the archdiocese, and we had office hours Monday through Friday, I think like 10 till 3, and women could come in and bring a urine specimen and come to us, and we would talk with them. They'd bring it and leave it. A med tech would come in to test it, and then the client would come back the next day to see what the results were. There weren't any fast pregnancy tests in those days.
Wow. Such a change just in that little thing.
Lots of changes. We had fundraisers. We had all kinds of things. We had a Las Vegas night one time. We had all kinds of things trying to raise money. But it was a wonderful thing. We also had night calls. So you could reach somebody 24 hours a day if you had.
So this would be, for example, if a woman is in crisis, doesn't know what to do, finds out she's pregnant, finds the night number or the 24-hour 7 line. Go ahead.
Well, even if she didn't know she was pregnant, because she was, for whatever reason, she could call us to find out how she could come get a pregnancy test, or if she was pregnant and came to us after. Quite often what we were doing then is making referrals to a maternity home, because at the time, I think there were 5 maternity homes in New Orleans at the time. Or maybe there were fewer, but at one time there were 5. And then they had several other maternity homes around in the Southeast.
So women would call at night, and all these volunteers would staff this line.
Yes.
And you'd be asleep, and your phone would ring.
Yes. And you'd answer the phone, and you would talk with the person, and you'd be hooked up to that, and then you'd do whatever, you'd help the person and follow through on it. So there were you helped many people, and sometimes it would mean taking someone into your home to stay with you it was just a different time too.
Sure.
Somebody needed a place to stay. Well, then they came and stayed with you for a short time. We had someone do that. One person who I was involved with helping, and she went off to a maternity home somewhere else, and the father of the child found out that she had gone away, and he wanted to assert his rights to this baby. And at the time, there were no father's rights. Well, he was one of the first ones to assert rights for the child. And actually, he ended up going on the Today Show. He ended up suing Catholic with the Archdiocese, me, and another counselor. Anyway, it was a big deal. And I think ultimately she wanted to give the child up, to release the child for adoption. And he wanted custody of the child, and I think he did get custody of the child. And years later, I came across the mother, and anyway, she was doing fine. Wow. Years later. But anyway, this is
1973 when this started. I guess after Roe v. Wade had legalized abortion, and so this is the first pregnancy center.
Yes. This actually had started a little before, I think, because when I got involved, it was right after. But the foundation had been put there by the Archbishop shortly before, as he had also laid the foundation for Right to Life through Bob Wynne by sending Bob Wynne to a meeting in Minneapolis
in 1970. So that was 3 years before Roe v. Wade.
Right.
So the foresight to set up the Right to Life, set up New Life, which is the first pregnancy center in Louisiana that I'm aware of.
Yes.
And then all these volunteers like yourself who are leading this, serving moms, serving these women, helping them, adoption, everything else in the process. So what I just think big picture wise, it's so neat that it was so quick and it was decisive, the need and the importance of helping moms right away. Of course, you've heard all these years people say, well, we don't care about moms, all these lies, these myths. Right from the beginning, people were stepping forward and helping.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
And I'm sure you can kind of remember the stories of and women who that benefited their life and the children that benefited from all this service.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the neat thing is that New Life eventually became Access Pregnancy Center and still exists today under Catholic Charities in New Orleans. So that's a pretty cool legacy, to think and think of. I mean, I don't know if they kept the numbers, but all the women, all the babies over all these years whose lives have been positively impacted by these pro-life people through this great organization.
And interestingly, oftentimes it's through the same generations of families. For instance, one of the med techs, the one who was on my Tuesday, was Rosemary Charbonnet, and her daughter, Ann Dardis, is one of our volunteers in Right to Life today.
So you're seeing passing through the generations.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. That's neat. So at that time, it wasn't long after that. So tell me, you've told me before that you were involved in that service aspect of it, but at some point you got involved with the Right to Life side of things, which is generally considered more of the political, legislative, educational side. So what went through your mind and how did that transition happen?
Well, it's shortly after I was involved with this, and I went to the March for Life in 1974. So that was like in January, probably just about a year after having gone to this meeting with the Archbishop. We were there to be part of the first March for Life.
So that was 1974, January 1974, and there you have the water there.
Yes.
So January 1974, that's a year after the Roe v. Wade decision, which would have been on January 22nd, 1973. So you went to the first March for Life.
Yes.
In January 1974.
Yes.
That's pretty neat.
Yes. Yes.
So what was it like? What was it? Tell me some of the sights and sounds. And
there were just a lot of people. There were from us, Bob Wynne was there, Judy Leggett, Linda Abel, her sister, Jerry Martinez, I think, and a few other people, mainly from New Orleans at that time. And we marched with other people. I don't remember quite how many people at that first one. I can remember very much later, like the second year, there were many, many people. The first year, I think I was a bit stunned because here I was in Washington kind of by myself, except with these other people. And we visited with some of the congressional delegation because that was our point, to go meet with the congressional delegation, to explain to them why we were there, why this January 22nd was important, what Roe v. Wade was about, and what we were trying to do as a result of the Roe v. Wade decision to overturn the legalization of abortion. So it was just really interesting to see all these people, though, flooding the hallways of Congress, going to meet with their delegation too.
And so this was, I mean, this was thousands of people still
Yes,
there. I mean,
there
now
were thousands.
today it's hundreds of thousands, right? It's
Right.
tons of people. So, but still, even though this was the first year, there were still lots of people.
There were lots of people there. There were, and we walked from the Eclipse behind the White House all the way to the Capitol, by the Supreme Court. Do that anymore. They cut the walk in half. I guess they don't want to be bothered with having to deal with
The White House.
That's
right. Yeah, probably.
But
so.
that's where, for many years, it began at the Eclipse and all the way up Pennsylvania Avenue part of the way, and then Constitution.
And you've shared with me that, when you now, I remember going to the March for Life first time, and you get to the top of the hill next to the Capitol, and you turn, and I'm sure there's a better name, but on top of Capitol Hill, you turn around and you see the sea of people.
Yes.
And you saw that in 1974. I mean, did it strike something, feeling?
Well, it's just amazing to think all these people are here for this one purpose. And I will say, in 74, I don't remember so much 74 as much as I remember 75.
I got you.
When then we had people from other parts of Louisiana there too. As Sharon Fontenot, for instance, my dear friend from Eunice, I met her then. And she and some others from other parts were there. And there were just millions, what seemed like millions of people, and standing on that hill, looking down, it was like there was no end to the people, just way and way. There were so many people. And we would, every year after the march, we would hurry back to the hotel to see us on television. We couldn't wait to see what they were going to say about all our wonderful march and all these people, and they would say nothing. They would say, and here were some people protesting abortion, but also there were these other people, and then they would give the other side more time than they gave us when they hardly had anybody. They might have had 4 people standing on the corner. And that's how it has continued forever.
Yeah, times don't change. The media was against us then, and they still continue today. Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, and you've shared with me that, first or second year, you say one of the youngest people at the march at the time, 33, 34 years old.
Yes. What we used to laugh about was say the other people were little old ladies in tennis shoes, because we were the young people, and most of the other people were like prayer group people, and we were young mothers. And then to look at how it's changed over the years, I mean, well, there's no way I'm not the old lady there, but now it's just so many students, and in the past 30 years, that's how it's changed. And it's just so wonderful to see young people there, high school and college students, and just so committed to this movement. And it's just a tremendous change. And it's all in education. When this whole thing started, people didn't even know, the congressman, when we went to meet with them, they didn't know why we were there. Abortion, well, what's going on with abortion? And we'd have to tell them about Roe v. Wade. And it was educating everyone, just like in our communities. Most people didn't know anything about Roe v. Wade. Even in church, priests didn't know. You didn't even find many priests who agreed with you, not because they didn't agree, but because they really weren't educated on the issue. I will say that our archbishops have always been 100% behind us. They have stood with us. They have been supportive. And we couldn't have asked for better archbishops, from Hannon all the way through. But It was not always that way with the priest, although that has changed too. Priests are very supportive. And it's all a matter of education, and that's kind of with the whole thing. It's a matter of education in this whole movement. As Bob Wynne said so often, you can change the law, but you really have to change the hearts and minds of people. You have to educate people, and people have to realize what this is, what abortion is, that it is the taking of an unborn, innocent life.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned about the young people at the March for Life. Well, I meant to say this off at the top, but my best recollection of the first time we met was I was a student at Loyola University, in our pro-life group, all 6 or 7 of us at the time. I can't remember this when I was a freshman or a sophomore, but we were in a plane. We're heading towards the March for Life. Now, we're college students, and I think we were in the back of the plane. And I think we were just cutting up, causing a racket, being loud and probably obnoxious too, Well, then we see this professional power woman coming down the aisle towards us. And you say, "Can y'all all keep it down back here?" And it was you. And then we probably a couple of days later at the congressional reception or wherever we were, met you there. So, so again, how time weaves its way so it's neat that you put us in line, but you were there heading to go to another March for Life, to stand for life. You then, you've told me before that you stayed involved with the service side of the pro-life movement, but you felt like, if I don't get involved in the legal side of things, we're not going to share what you said.
Overturning Roe v. Wade, which was going to make the real difference in the pro-life movement and really change. We had to change the law. And so then that's when I decided to get involved with Right to Life too. So I got involved with Right to Life, but I didn't drop the pregnancy counseling. So the two of them I've kind of carried on throughout my life. And actually kind of going along with that, I mentioned after the secretarial school was over, I then worked at Catholic Charities directing a refugee social services program while the Vietnamese were coming in and the Haitians during the late 70s and early 80s. So I was there for 11 years, while I was also doing pro-life work, and fortunately working for Catholic Charities. They liked the fact that I was doing pro-life work, so the two could kind of work together. And then,
so it's like by day you were, helping immigrants and helping families coming to the New Orleans area, and then by night you're the pro-life activist and pro-life leader. So
or sort of in between,
all
too.
Mixed together. That's great. What I love about your story is you share the story about you were helping the women through secretarial training to get into the workforce, the impact you made on those lives. You made an impact on the lives of immigrants coming to the area, and on the pro-life side. So, the respect for the dignity of the human person is the thread that runs through all of these things, and I would think motivates you to be and to carry on this pro-life work for your whole life, right?
I guess that's it. It's kind of interesting because, as I said, I probably wouldn't have written this script, but it's kind of like being open to God's calling. This is where he's put me. And on top of that, I went to law school, and it was like, why am I going to law school? And that added to it. And it was also a good thing too. You just don't know. You just have to be open to what God has planned for you. And it's not what you'd often write. But now as I look back and I think, gosh, I wouldn't have written it any differently if I could have.
And so you went to law school, and then you worked as an attorney.
Yes.
4 years before you retired. Wow, that's a lot of different things. Your law school experience and then working as an attorney, all the pro-life activities continued throughout that whole time.
Yes.
Okay, well then let's try to remember again. There's going back to try to remember some of the vivid memories and the vivid things that happened, over the many years. Even, I don't know if this is going to be chronological in any way, but, going back to, let's say, what was it, 76, 77 with the Equal Rights Amendment debates, which, for those who don't know, just a little bit of background is, the Equal Rights Amendment was being put up as a U.S. constitutional amendment but it had no protection from allowing it to be used to expand abortion rights. And that's what the pro-life movement wasn't against equal rights for women, but it was afraid, or not. We knew it would be used, or you knew it would be used in a way to expand abortion.
That's right.
Touch on that.
Okay, it was actually the fall of 77 to the fall of 78. Part of the whole thing was to use it for abortion. I mean, that's the abortion fight was going on in Congress as soon as Roe v. Wade came down. We were constantly trying to just chip away, and the other side was trying to make sure abortion was enshrined in the law. And if they could get the ERA to be enshrined and extended, that's what they were trying to do, extend the time for states to sign on to keeping the ERA, then they felt like abortion would be safe. And it was Lindy Boggs. Well, first of all, we had 3 Democrats usually in our Louisiana congressional delegation, but they were always pro-life. It was a different time in Congress.
It wasn't about the early 90s is when that really divide really began.
I think so, yeah. There wasn't this partisanship at that time. And John Breaux and Billy Tozan, Lindy Boggs were all, they were very pro-life, and they were Democrats. Tozan ended up being a Republican later on. But we got along well. It was just a great group. We always had good people representing us everywhere throughout our state. And the Equal Rights Amendment, of course, Lindy Boggs was very important because she was the most respected woman in Congress, and they wanted her vote, and we wanted her to vote against it. And so we met with her. I had flown up there to meet with her on that vote, and she was so cordial and just a lovely person. And I thought for sure she was going to vote against it, and she went in there and she voted the wrong way, and it was like, oh no. But anyway, it failed. We won.
You were right outside the House chamber.
Yes.
Talking with her. Yeah.
Yes, right. We met with her like she had to walk 4 steps to get into the House chamber to vote.
Which is great, because you can't do that today. You're like you're like way up in the, you can't get that much access these days.
This was in the old days.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she even voting against you, she would say, "Oh, darling, I understand, but I just don't see it that way. And I'm sure this will not affect abortion. They have promised me it won't, Yeah. But anyway, we won, so we never had to find that out. But
right, when it's still a fight today, and we always say that let's put language in there that says this doesn't. I mean, there's better words than this, but this doesn't have anything impact on abortion. And then that. So I think that's the key thing here. And unfortunately, it was in the 80s when Congress, that amendment was put up on the ERA. And then the ERA proponents at the time voted it down, which showed their true colors, that abortion was central to that effort. Okay, and then right before that, though, was the Hyde Amendment in 76, which stops federal funding for abortion. I don't even know. I don't think I've ever heard anything about, was that contentious? Was that tough?
I think the Hyde Amendment, I don't recall it being contentious. I think the Hyde Amendment went through pretty well. Around the same time, there was a Hatch Amendment, and that was a little later, and that was to overturn Roe v. Wade in 81. And of course, that didn't pass, but that was contentious, and we were hopeful that would pass. And as I can remember, maybe that would have passed had we had some exceptions, but that was a fight about, do we have exceptions or do we not? So maybe had we had some exceptions, we might have gotten something, but we didn't get anything anyway. But the Hyde Amendment, I don't recall that being a big fight.
Well, and then it was, Hyde, of course, is Congressman Henry Hyde, who was named after a big pro-life advocate. Well, and then it was 1987 that the National Rights Life Convention came to New Orleans, and he came and spoke. I think that's right. And he came here, and of course, he was a big advocate. So y'all hosted the National Rights Life Convention in 1987, right?
Yes,
is that 87?
I think so.
Yeah. And how was that?
Well, people always love to have anything in New Orleans. I mean,
Right.
they'd have the National Right to Life Convention in New Orleans every year if we were willing to
Right.
do it.
Hosted.
It was great. I mean, we know how to throw a party, and you have Henry Hyde, you have other. It's easier to get good speakers to come
Yeah.
here too. So
I think it was Dan Quayle who came, because I remember seeing, I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but I've seen some pictures in the office and
Yes.
either he was running for vice, I can't remember exactly, but
Or that might have been, I don't know, that might have been for the Republican convention.
I got you. Okay.
The Republican convention was here.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
what in the 80s on your list, any other the memories in there? I know that we'll get to 1990 here in a second, but anything sticking out on your list or other vivid memories around that time?
Well, yeah. 1985 was Bernard Nathanson, who was an abortionist turned pro-life person. It was some kind of documentary called The Silent Scream, and it showed a fetus being touched by an object.
Yeah,
and
a tool.
You could see the baby move, that it felt this tool touching it, and it moved. It was called the silent scream. So this baby pulled away, like screaming from the touch of this. It showed that the baby could feel this, and it was the silent scream. It was the first time that there had ever been a picture of a baby moving in utero and showing that it felt pain. And so it was quite a step forward in proof of the humanity and what the fetus could feel. And anyway, that was brought public in the beginning of 85. But in 84, I think it was before it went public, we had him at our breakfast for our congressional delegation. And we were one of the first to show this privately to our constituency, our congressional delegation. And so by this time, we were no longer going from originally when we went up with our constituents, like a person from each congressional district would go up for the March for Life, and we would set up meetings to go to everybody's office and our senator's office, and we would tell them what the issues were, what we anticipated, what legislation would be brought up in the next session. And then after a while, we changed into having these breakfasts, and this was the breakfast we were having, and showed this, and we had our congressmen and senators there. And that was just a very, very moving time for me to see that movie, as I think probably anybody who saw it, because it was kind of the follow-up to what we called the Wilkie slides. The Wilkie slides were the slides that had first come out by Dr. Jack Wilkie, which showed the development of the unborn child. And now that had come out back in the 60s. And now this was the next step in the development of the child. And so that was something that was really...
And impacted a lot. It impacted you,
Mm-hmm.
which you were already, motivated, but I guess it certainly propelled you. And I know it was recently someone was saying, oh yeah, I asked, how'd you get involved? And they said, well, I saw the silent scream and I couldn't forget. So I've been involved since, So that's definitely made, a big impact. As the 80s ended, there's this momentum that you think that the court and many things are lined up to overturn Roe v. Wade. So you come to 1990, and Louisiana Right to Life and others are leading the effort at the state capitol in Baton Rouge to pass a law to protect unborn babies, to bring an end to abortion in Louisiana, knowing that you have to challenge the Supreme Court precedent in that situation. So it brings us to 1990 and those laws and the excitement surrounding 1990 and 1991 of trying to pass these laws. What memories you have around that?
Well, up until 1985, everything that we did was totally volunteers. We didn't have any paid staff doing anything. So everything was volunteer. In 85, we were able to, the Archbishop hired Peg Kenny to be the Respect Life coordinator for the Archdiocese, which also meant that she could coordinate the Right to Life activities throughout the state. So she had a double job. So that meant we had this one person, poor Peg, who's still with us now and still carries all kinds of loads for everything. So by 90, and we were always looking to pass a lot of legislation in the Louisiana legislature, because we were looking throughout the country to find the legislation that would overturn Roe v. Wade. And it was going to have to come through the states because it wasn't coming through Congress. And so we hired Sharon Fontenot. We got some money, a donation to hire Sharon Fontenot from Eunice to be our lobbyist, to help Emil Komar, who was the lobbyist for the Catholic Conference. And he had been kind of helping us. He was always helping us before this as we lobbied in Baton Rouge. And so this particular year, we were in 90, Governor Buddy Romer, who had said he was pro-life, was in office, and we introduced a bill
that would, bring an end to abortion in the state. And I think you passed it in the legislature during the 90 session, but then Romer vetoed it, right?
Romer vetoed it. And then
but there was still, as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong, there was still time in the 1990 session. So he vetoed the bill during the middle of the session, which was somewhat unexpected. He vetoes it. And then you all look with legislators and say, is there a bill left that can be modified and pass another bill in hopes that you could override his veto?
Okay, because the first bill was no exceptions. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. And he had said, well, I have to have an exception to sign the bill.
And so there was no exception, like for the life of the mother or for rape or incest, as I recall. So then we said, okay, we will bring a bill up with a life of the mother exception and rape and incest. And although the bishop certainly didn't want rape or incest, nor did we, but it was better to get what we could get rather than get nothing. So it was, okay, but how are we going to get this back up? And so we went to the president of the Senate, and Bob Wynne talked to him and said, let's try again. How can we get this up? And he said, the only bill we have is a flag burning bill, that you can't burn the flag. And he said, that's a cinch to pass because nobody, in this state's going to want to burn the flag. And he said, so if we can attach it to the flag burning bill, then that'll pass. So that's what they introduced in the Senate. And then it went to the House. It passed both. So we thought we were home free. Well, then session ended. And after the session ended, Romer then afterwards vetoed it. Well, it was too late for it to be overridden during the session because the session was over, and then they didn't call back the session to come back in. So that was it for that year. But then the next year we came back in, we introduced it again, and it passed, and we overrode him the second year.
So he vetoed 3 pro-life bills, and you almost overrode the first one. You would have overrode the second one if he hadn't have waited. And then in 1991, you passed this monumental law, the pro-life movement, and it becomes the first override of a governor's veto in Louisiana history that one. And I mean, I've heard of reports of all these people coming to the Capitol and demanding the override, and just the energy and the momentum at the time.
Supposedly, there were 3,000 people outside of the Capitol marching around going, override, override, override. And it was pouring rain. And anyway, it was quite a thing. And it got a lot of national attention, first of all, because it was attached to a flag burning bill. And then because we did override for the first time in history. It was quite interesting.
So that means Louisiana then is a leading state, a leading voice at the time, which it still is today. And so that was in 1991. The case goes into federal court. Of course, it gets wrapped up in federal court. And then in 1992, the Supreme Court releases the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision, which was unrelated to Louisiana. It was about a Pennsylvania case. And sadly, they chose not to overturn Roe v. Wade, basically throwing the Louisiana law out in the process. Right. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court upheld Roe v. Wade, and then all the work y'all did in 1991 was thrown out, unfortunately.
We were so sure that that case was going to be the case to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, we just were sure that that was going to happen.
And then the letdown in '92. I mean, that's what you've shared and others have shared. You thought Roe v. Wade was going to be over soon. You thought we would be able to close abortion facilities in the state. Supreme Court went the other way. Republican justices. So that had to be a low point in the fight.
Yes. Yeah, during that time, it was like, just as you said, Republican justices, because there were Republicans that were people who we thought were pro-life being appointed to the Supreme Court. Souter.
O'Connor.
I mean, they were both supposed to be pro-life. How they slipped through, I don't know. But I mean, it was just devastating because it was like we couldn't catch a break. Everything was going the wrong way, and it just, everything kept sliding. So it was just keep working at it. But it was slow in those years, and just had to keep working at the state level and going for incremental
and educating people.
Yes.
All at the same time. You know,
that's right.
Okay, what any other memories that you had that have stuck out to you over the years?
I think things like important things like when we did the Choose Life license plate. You know, if you look around Louisiana, you can see Choose Life license plates everywhere, and that's a big testament to this state and this community. That was a big thing that we did. One big thing, and this was, Ben, you'll remember what year better than I, but in the not too distant past, when Planned Parenthood wanted to open their facility here in New Orleans and in Baton Rouge to provide abortions. They got the land on Claiborne Avenue here to build their facility, but they had a hard time getting that building built because all the people who provided services, the plumbers, the electricians, these concrete people, the builders, wouldn't service them. They couldn't get the materials they wanted because the word got out, don't do business with Planned Parenthood. And it was just a great opportunity for people who otherwise didn't get involved with this, got involved, spread the word, and it held up the building of that facility. It ultimately did get built, but it never did provide abortions because they never could get a license through the state because the state wouldn't give them a license. So they did have their building, which closed how many months ago?
Yeah, earlier back in September. So the full circle, right? I mean, all that effort, you know, the contractors, the concrete providers, everyone who was involved in that, trying to stop that. People across, you know, Catholics, Baptists, it was such a neat experience to see the unity that people had together, and yet to now that it's closed, and which is definitely a great full circle moment to see that being closed. That's pretty neat. So.
And then we did have an abortion clinic there. We have had abortion clinics here.
Yes.
And so we've many times had people picketing out, you know, every Saturday picketing out at the abortion clinics. One out in Metairie, there was one on Gravier Street, and there was Delta Women's Clinic on St. Charles Avenue. That was the first one that closed I guess that was in the 90s it closed. But they didn't last, and because a lot of people prayed and a lot of people did what they could to get rid of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, of course, there's so many stories, and we'll have to think more and come back another day. But I guess, you know, if you one time shared with me, or I think multiple times back in 73, or when you started, you said to me that you felt like, well, if I don't get involved now, in 5 years, this is still going to be here. Well, here we are in 2026, and the situation is a lot different, right? Abortion facilities are closed here, but we know the problems with abortion all over the country. The abortion pill, certainly the culture of death is at large. You know, as you said, in 5 years, if we don't get involved, it's still going to be here. Well, it's still here, and the fight still goes on. So I guess, you know, looking back, I guess, what are your reflections or your thoughts over this whole time?
It's hard to say. I think that you're right. I mean, my thought initially was exactly as you say. I thought if I don't get involved now, 5 years, we'll still be fighting this. And here I am 51 years later doing the same thing. And that's just God's plan. I guess he didn't say this was going to be a rose garden. You know, life isn't easy and this isn't an easy fight. But it's up to each one of us to do what we can and to work in this garden and to try to get rid of these thorns that are abortion. It's whatever you can do. It needs to be done in some way, whether that's praying, whether that's being active in some way. But whatever it is, do something for the dignity of human life. Because if we don't have respect for the unborn, then we don't have respect for any life. And it has to go from one to the next to the next. And I just, you can only learn that by what you have inside of you and what you feel for other people. It's hard to teach anyone that, I guess. I would just say to people, look at what it is today. Look at what abortion is. Look at how the world has changed since 1973, when abortion became legal, and how there is so much less respect for human life now than there was then. And if we can change and have respect for the unborn, I believe that our whole world will change. That's, and if you don't do something now, who will do it?
Absolutely. If we don't stand up, if we don't do something about it, and it takes average, everyday people, right? I mean, you were a 33-year-old mother and you stepped in, like you said, you didn't write the script, but you followed God's call and God's plan. And we need everyone, Joe Schmo out there, Jane Schmo, everyone everyone's called to have a role and a place in this cause, in this movement. Could be through a pregnancy center, could be through prayers, it could be through donations. There's so many things for people to do to help and be a helping hand for this cause.
And just be alert to how God's calling you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sharon, it's definitely been a blessing to have you on with us today. I appreciate your mentorship and leadership over these years and all you've done. And I'm sure on that list, there's a lot of other stories that we haven't covered today or didn't touch on, but we'll have to do it again and cover everything else that we didn't cover today.
Well, thank you, Ben. And thanks to all the people that I kind of speak for in this, to, some I named, some I guess I didn't name. I think I didn't name Kathleen Benfield, who has been such a stalwart through all of this. And I said Peg Kenny, Judy Leggett, Bob Wynn, who's no longer with us, Sharon Fontenot, who's very ill right now, and to Suzanne Tierney, and just all the people who have made the history of right to life in Louisiana so important, and we've all become as one.
And the impact that y'all have made and the legacy, how pro-life Louisiana is. I mean, now I think our people were maybe inclined to be more pro-life, but still it didn't happen by accident. It was a lot of people who put in time, energy, and effort, sacrificed a lot, like Bob, like others, like you said, to make Louisiana what it is today. So, yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for being on. Well, thanks everybody for listening today and listening to Sharon Rodi's testimony. Go out, find where God is calling you to be active in this cause. We need everyone to be a part of building a culture of life where every life is respected, protected by law, welcomed with love, where mothers are supported, where adoption is a crucial and critical option at all times. So thanks very much. Check us out. Spread the word. Louisiana Right to Life on social media at LA Right to Life. Thanks so much.